Hello students, we are now going to the second session of mercantile law. The previous session I have given you about the basics of mercantile law. So today and I have explained about Contract Act. Today we'll be going about the essentials of a contract. We'll be talking about essentials of a contract, what are different types of contracts. Then we'll be talking about what an offer is, what an acceptance is. Yep. And then we'll be talking about whether an offer or acceptance, when can it be revoked? Revoked in the sense cancelled. We'll be talking about all the essential terms of a contract. Contract, as I have explained previously, refers to an agreement enforceable by court of law. Yes, everybody by now might have got it. What is meant by a proposer? Yeah, who is called a proposer? And who is called as an acceptor, and what is called as a promise? Yes. And then what is the difference between contract and agreement? We have all discussed in our previous class. Now further, without wasting any time, let us now discuss about essentials of a valid contract. Before starting that, let me tell you, I'll be teaching all these concepts with reference to your study material. As and when clear, right? As and when you are hearing the class, I request you all to keep your study materials in front of you along with the notebook. I'll be dictating some aspects which are important. I'll be asking you to mark certain case studies to understand the context as well as in view of purview of examination point. Because thing is, once you understand the case study, the respective section becomes easier for you to understand. So now let us start with what are the essentials of a valid contract. Previously I have explained that contract means an agreement enforceable by law. An agreement, you know what is an agreement? We have discussed about forcible by law. Agreement means promise or set of promises forming consideration for each other. Then we have learned about promise. Then we have learned as to who is called as offerer and who is called as what is called as a promise. Now okay, once that is done, as of now you must be having an idea stating that a person has given an offer to another person. He had made a proposal to another person. That other person had accepted it, and this acceptance is complete. Then after acceptance is completed, are we supposed to call it a contract or are we supposed to call it an agreement? For that there are certain tests. So what are the tests which are given in the legal point of view, or which is clearly stated in the agreement as per section 10 of Contract Act? So what are they? First and foremost being, there should be an agreement. Once agreement is there, the agreement should be given via free consent. Then second and third thing is, parties should be competent enough. Parties are competent enough. Then there should be certain lawful consideration. The object, the main goal or the enforceability should be legal. In your study material, he has given it as legal object, but I'll call it as legally enforceable. Legally enforceable. Okay. And last but not the least is, it should not be expressly declared to be void. So what are the essentials of a contract as per section 10? So first and foremost, there should be agreement between two parties. Now please take your study material, page number 1.4. I'll be explaining this under the context of a case study. Here he has taken the case study of S. Ramanlal S. and Co. So what is the case over here? See, there is this assessing officer. He is an income tax officer. You know, when there is certain profit or when there is an income, tax is levied on it. Mr. Raman Lal and Co. is a partnership firm. So these partners have come together and dissolved this partnership firm. Dissolved in the sense they have closed down the partnership firm and then they have actually divided the money among the partners. The assessing officer said, see, this constitutes a contract between partnership firm as well as partners. So they have to pay income tax. But do you think that is the case? No. Why? We recognize partners and partnership firm as one as per Gardner versus Murray rule. I'll be explaining this in detail when we take up that particular session. So Gardner versus Murray rule, partners and partnership firm is considered to be one entity. Yeah, so that's why it is called as liability is unlimited for a partnership firm. So the income tax officer said, okay, fine. Now that you have dissolved, he didn't take this rule into consideration. Now the partnership is dissolved. There is a contract, you have divided. So I want you to pay tax on whatever amount you have got after dissolution of partnership firm. But the court rule saying that assessing officer is incorrect. Why? There are no two parties. So to make a contract, there should be one offerer or proposer and an acceptance should be given by another party. That is called as proper agreement should be there between two parties. Then comes free consent. Free consent means what? Free consent is something wherein a person is not forced to sign anything or not like influenced by anything to enter into a contract. Say a person comes into being and says, see, sell me your house, I'll pay you 5 lakh rupees, otherwise I'm going to kill you with this gun. What is this called? There is no free consent. Let's say A had come to B and on a gunpoint. Gunpoint is he's put a gun on his forehead and said, see Mr. B, if you don't sell this house to me, then I'm going to kill you. What is this called? Consent obtained under coercion. Coercion is literally forcing a person to do something which he doesn't like. In case if you have any terms which you don't understand, please feel free to contact me. So there should be free consent. In case if the consent has been obtained by force, then also the contract cannot be considered as proper. It is not a valid contract. It will be considered as void. What do you mean by void? It is not recognized by court of law and none of the parties will have any benefits towards it. Yeah, it will be dealt by under other sections of the law. Like in this case, the Indian Penal Code would come into being. The Contract Act will not be considered and the person who had forced Mr. B, that is Mr. A had forced Mr. B. So Mr. A will be tried under IPC. So first thing, there should be free consent. The third part is the party should be competent enough. Competent enough means what? You cannot enter into a contract with a baby or a minor or a person who is of unsound mind. Let's say a person has a property worth 50 lakh rupees and let's say he is of unsound mind. He cannot make rational decisions. Rational means he doesn't know what is correct, what is not correct. So let's say his name is U. Mr. A goes to Mr. U and says, U, I'll give you lots of chocolates, would you sign these documents? Obviously, because Mr. U is not in a position to make rational decisions, he will sign the contract. In such a situation, definitely the contract cannot be called as enforceable. To be a contract, the parties should be competent enough. So what are considered as incompetent parties? Usually, they are, in case he is below 18 years old, that is, if he is a minor, an idiot, a drunkard person. In short, it means a person should be of sound mind. A person disqualified by his status. Like what? That is an enemy of the country, an enemy, foreign sovereigns, convicts, etc. So all these people are not competent enough. Parties not competent enough. So these are the people who are not competent enough for a contract. If a party is below 18 years, he happens to be a lunatic. Lunatic is of unsound mind. Whom do we call idiots? Somebody very well knowingly creates trouble for others. Like for example, you might have seen some people in motorcycles, wantedly they, what I can call it as, disenable their silencers and try going really fast on the roads. Those people are called as idiots. I mean to say they do not have concern for others. There might be hospitals, there might be ambulances. They don't understand how the percentage or the amount of sound pollution they are causing. A person might be going to a hospital, the houses nearby, they might be having some other works, but they still want to act smart. Those kind of people are called as idiots. Then a drunkard person. Definitely drunkards, they usually do not or cannot make any rational decisions. So they're called as drunkard persons. Then, in short, a person should be of sound mind. These are unsound minded people. Then, last but not the least is a person disqualified by his status. Like what? An enemy. Like you cannot, as of now, because there are tensions between India and China, I can take this as a safe example. You usually don't enter into a contracts with the enemy country or the country which you feel that like the sovereignty of the country you're living is being compromised. Compromised in the sense it means it's in danger. An enemy, a foreign sovereign, or a conflict. So the parties should be competent enough to contract. These are the parties. I'll write like this. In short, a person should be of sound mind while entering into a contract. Entering into a contract. The next one is lawful consideration. Consideration means both the parties should have some amount of benefit. Without any benefit, they cannot definitely call it as a contract. So there should be a lawful consideration. Moreover, these should be legally enforceable. Enforceable means the contract can be or should be enforceable in court of law. You please take your study materials and again page number 1.3. I wish to, 1.3, I wish to touch upon this topic, point number 2. Parties must intend to create legal obligations. Here he has taken the case study Balfour versus Balfour. This is a very important case study, the basic case study. Here the contract, here the case is an husband and wife. They come into an agreement saying that the husband has to pay certain allowance to a wife. Okay, so he keeps on paying this allowance. But after a few days, the husband goes abroad and he fails to pay this allowance. That is, he does not pay this allowance to his wife. In such situation, the wife had sued the husband. Believe it or not, this happened in the year, I'm not very sure, but it was way back in early 19th century. Yeah, the wife sued the husband, or I mean to say, she had put a case on her husband, saying that, see, Mr. Judge, my husband is not paying any money to me. And definitely, the judge was shocked. He said, see, lady, this cannot be accepted as contract because this is a domestic issue. They have recognized it as a domestic issue and they have called it as a social agreement. And while this agreement is being made, none of the parties intended to create a legal obligation. Okay, so that is why Balfour versus Balfour is always taken while explaining about legal enforceability. Okay, it's a social agreement. You make an agreement with your brothers. Tell them like you give me your books, I'll give you my gaming console, or let's say I'll give you my board game. What is that? It's an agreement. Let's say you have given your gaming console, but your brother had not given his book. Then can you go to court of law? Usually no. Why? Because law recognizes it as a social agreement. Then let's talk about not be expressly declared to be void. As of now, please remember expressly means either clearly, please understand the meaning clearly stated by words or by actions. Either clearly stated by words or by actions. Not be expressly declared to be void. Express here does not mean speed. In law, henceforth, expressly refers to clearly, something which is being clearly stated either by words or actions. So it should not be expressly declared to be void. Let us say a person goes near a small baby and says, baby, you give me your property, I'll give you money. Do you think that contract is worth the contract even though he's saying certain words? No. First of all, the baby is a minor. Second thing, moreover, he is not rational. And moreover, his actions show the offerer or the proposer is of unsound mind. Nobody goes and makes a proposal with a baby unless and until it happens to be a Bahubali movie. Just in a lighter way. Okay. So these are the essentials of a contract as per section 10. So this is what section 10 had explained. But indirectly, can we pick out, or in an implied manner, can we pick out what are the essentials of a contract from this section 10? This one had been given over here. What does it say? From these aspects, you can definitely say that there should be compulsorily two parties to a contract, which had been explained in S. Ramanlal and Co. Moreover, these parties should have an intention to create a legal relationship. Balfour versus Balfour. Social agreement. Agreement between husband and wife had been given as a social agreement, not an legally enforceable agreement. So what is the test? How do we differentiate between social agreement and legally enforceable? Because nowadays, owing to lots of prenuptial agreements and divorces, you might get a doubt. This happened before the age of prenuptials. Like in case if two people are getting married with the prenuptial agreement, prenuptial is before marriage, they come into an agreement stating that husband has to fulfill so and so duties, the wife has to fulfill so and so duties. Einstein being the first person of doing that. In case if there is certain prenuptial agreement, then yes, it is enforceable in court of law because they have an intent of creating an legal obligation. Here it is just a said agreement. It has not been signed. So this Balfour versus Balfour comes under social agreement. Then comes legal formalities, fulfillment of legal formalities. See, when the proposer is stating a contract, there are certain legal formalities to be fulfilled. What can they be? Legal formalities, he might say, I have to receive my acceptance in writing. Or what does he say? He says that, please send me a mail or showing your acceptance followed by a hard copy. In such situation, the acceptor has to follow the definite guidelines. Like best example is insurance. In case of an insurance, compulsorily the insurance copy should be written. Okay, then definitely there should be, the contract should be based on a lawful object which is meaningful. The meaning should be certain. It should not be vague. Let me say I'm going to deliver 100 cans of oil tomorrow. Do you think the agreement is clear? No. Why? Because we don't know whether those oil, whether that particular oil is coconut oil or palm oil or groundnut oil, whatsoever. It's not clear. Or is it first of all refined oil, or is it used for other purposes? And how is that oil being carried on? All these things have not been clearly stated in an agreement. So definitely this also does not come under a valid contract. Then there should be a possibility of performance. What do you mean by possibility of performance? Performance means compulsorily a person has to perform a contract. Like he should be in a position to perform a contract. What do you mean by it, madam? Let me say I have entered into a contract with Mr. Z, asking him to create money by doing magic. Is it possible in real life sense? Not in fantasy movies. Definitely either in movies or in some science fiction stories or any kinds of mythological stories we find such aspects. But in real life, is it possible? No. In that case also, a contract will not be recognized as an valid contract. So as per section 10 I have discussed, and then whatever have not been implied in section 10 also have discussed. In case of any doubts, please let me know. Now we'll talk about various types of contracts. What are the various types of contracts? What are the different types of contracts? So different types of contracts have been classified into 3 different models. Contracts based on validity or enforceability. Validity or enforceability. Then you have got contracts based on formation. Then contracts based on execution. So what are the various contracts based on validity or enforceability? So first and foremost being valid contracts. The second one being void contracts. The third one being voidable contracts. And the fourth one being illegal contracts. The fifth one being unenforceable contracts. Unenforceable contracts. Based on formation, we have express contracts. Then we have got implied contracts. Then we have got express contracts, implied contracts, quasi contracts. Then we have got e-com contracts. The next one we have got is execution, based on execution. Executionary contracts. The next one is non-executionary contracts. Again, this is divided into two, that is unilateral contracts and bilateral contracts. Okay, so yeah, different types of contracts we have got. Altogether, different types of contracts. So what are the different types of contracts? Contracts based on validity or enforceability. Validity or enforceability is whether the contract can be enforceable in court of law. Like in case if there is any problem in the contract, will the court recognize it or not as a contract? Right? The first and foremost be valid contracts. Valid contracts means in all significant terms it has fulfilled the conditions of contracts. Like just now we have discussed the previous topic. What is it? Free consent, two parties, agreement is very much there, and legal enforceability is there, lawful consideration is there, and expressly it has not been declared as void. And the other conditions being it's not a social agreement, yeah, and all the underlying conditions have been fulfilled, and moreover the object is enforceable, the terms are clear, all these things have been properly executed. Such kind of contracts are called as what? Valid contracts. Then comes void contracts. Void means, you write this definition, void means something which is not enforceable in court of law. Meaning what? Not valid or legally binding. Void, what is the meaning? Something which is not valid or legally binding. That is called as void. So these contracts, like for example, usually sometimes Mr. A had entered into contract with Mr. B. Mr. B, let us say A had asked Mr. B to audit books of accounts of A. B had agreed. So valid contract. But they have given all the terms in writing. But unfortunately, B had passed away even before starting the audit of books of accounts. That is called as what? Void contract. The contract had now become void. Money by it is not valid because Mr. B is no more. It is neither valid nor legally binding. So it is called as void contract. It is not, he cannot sue Mr. B who is dead now. Then comes voidable contracts. What do you mean by voidable contracts? Voidable contracts, in this contract, please listen carefully. There might be a bit of confusion, but I'll try to explain it as clearly as possible. So what do you mean by voidable contracts? Voidable contract is something wherein it is, the contract can become void at the option of one single party. Please underline that line in your study material. The contracts becomes void at the option of one single party. How is that possible, madam? Let us see. Let us take Mr. A and B as example. A at a gunpoint had forced Mr. B to sell his property for 50 lakhs to Mr. A, right? In case of Mr. B does not raise his voice and sells it, still without knowledge of anybody saying that A had forced him or coerced him to sell his property, it becomes a valid contract. But B, in court of law, he proves that Mr. A had coerced him, money forced him to sell the property, then this contract will be recognized as void contract. Did you get me? Mr. B, the aggrieved party, he had proved in court of law that Mr. A had coerced him to sell the property at gunpoint. Then the contract becomes voidable contract. Simple way you can void. I'll ask you to use, if you put A to void, it becomes a void, right? The first one is avoided contracts. The second one is avoidable. Money what? A person is ready to let go. See, nobody can force a person to do a particular thing. And especially by coercion or undue influence is something very, very bad. It is not even recognized in court of law. Hope you have understood what voidable contracts are. Then comes illegal contracts. What do you mean by illegal contracts? Illegal contracts refer to those contracts which are illegal in nature. The very nature is illegal as per IPC. That is what Indian Penal Code. Let's say there is one Mr. A, then Mr. B. A had entered into contract with Mr. B to kill Mr. C. Is that a contract? Can it be enforceable in court of law? No. Nevertheless, it can never ever be enforceable in court of law. Moreover, all these two, both of them will be punished. That is Mr. A and Mr. B. So that's why it is called as what? Illegal contracts. Then comes unenforceable contracts. What do you mean by the word unenforceable? Unenforceable is something which cannot be tried in court of law. What do you mean by that? See, the contract had been entered into good faith. Mane, the substance of contract is very much there. I mean to say clear. It's done in good faith. Good faith means there's nothing wrong in that contract. But the contract is in such a manner that it cannot be unenforceable. Like for example, in olden days, or let's say previously, there was this goat called as Angora goat. Yeah, Angora goat which was found in Himalayas. People used to kill the goat, I mean to say cut its neck and then take hair, which it seems it would be grown in that neck part, and would build and would make shawls and all. They were called as Pashmina, if I'm not mistaken. And it was considered a normal practice. It was a normal practice till 1991. But later, Indian acts have come into being, cruelty towards animals. They have stopped doing such aspects. In case, let's say, in the year 1992, A had entered into Mr. B to make so and so Pashmina shawl. He said he'll pay 10,000 rupees for it. Mr. B started, he started rearing animals and he was about to kill an animal. But suddenly, the act had been enforced in court of law stating that killing Angora goats is a crime. Automatically, the contract becomes unenforceable. Mind you, unenforceable, but as per Contract Act. In case of Mr. B kills that Angora goat, he'll be tried under IPC, Indian Penal Code. Hope you have understood the meaning. This is unenforceable contracts. See, difference between, now that you have known the substance, the difference between various types of contracts is given in your study material. I want you to go through them properly or thoroughly, and here, page number 1.8 and 1.9. Please go through them. They can be asked for short answers. Then comes express contracts and implied contracts. Just now I explained express. Express here means clearly stated, clearly stated, clearly explained. How will a clear explanation go? Either by words. by words. Words can be either written or said, or by action. Okay, how madam, how can I differentiate? I'll take a small example. I have a 3-year-old child. So let's say I have made some food and I have let's say I have given her some snacks. So in case if she likes it, she immediately eats it. If she doesn't like it, that's all. The snacks are all around the place. What does it imply? She did not like the snacks. Those are called as what? By action. Similarly, in contracts also, by action, they might show their kind of uneasiness. That is called as by action. Then, by words. Words, this is the most simplest way. Either the contract can be documented, clearly written, or said in words, either by way of telephonic conversation or by way of emails or Skype nowadays, as we are doing right now, virtually as well. Yeah, the law recognizes virtual transactions as well. So, express contracts are the ones wherein the terms of contracts are clearly stated either by words or actions. Then comes implied contracts. I'll give you an example, right? Okay. See, there like in a railway station, there is a coolie or a porter, P-O-R-T-E-R, coolie, yeah, a regular coolie. What does he do? Sometimes they are very clever. Once the train stops, they barge into the compartments, they take up the goods. They take up those suitcases and all and they start carrying even before you ask them to carry. Sometimes with no choice, having no choice, like let's say elderly people or people having more luggage, they give it to them, and after reaching the destination, you immediately have to pay it. Mind you, you never call them, you never negotiated the price, but still it is recognized as a contract. What are those contracts called as? Implied contracts. It's an implication. It's by way of a behavior. These are called as implied contracts. So the best example I can quote is with regard to your roadside car cleaners, especially. You might be seeing some youngsters cleaning the windshield of the car. The moment the car stops, a youngster comes forward and starts cleaning the windshield. What is that? And then the moment he cleans it, he'll ask you to pay him some money. Definitely the law says even this time, as long as you don't stop him from cleaning it. See, if the moment he starts cleaning, you stop him, then fine. No, there are some people who gets the car cleaned, but they don't pay the money. That is incorrect. Usually what the act says is, let's say a car cleaner has come, once a signal had come on at the time of stop signal, then he started cleaning the car. After that, the car driver compulsorily has to pay some money to the car cleaner. That is called as what? Implied contracts. The case study had been given in page number 1.10 of your, not case study, example had been given in 1.10. Then comes part of implied contract is tacit. Tacit means silent. Tacit means what? Silent contracts. Tacit means silent contracts. Like best example for tacit is ATM, withdrawing amount from ATM. Are we talking with anyone? We are using the technology to withdraw. Definitely there is a contract here also. You have saved the money in the bank. Yep. The bank is holding the money for you. As and when you require money, you go to the bank and withdraw it. In that case, you have a teller of the bank. Teller means the respective clerk of the bank as well as the teller of the bank as well as the customer. In case of a tacit contract, you don't have any teller facing you. Teller in the sense the clerk of the bank facing you. You only have a customer and a machine. He enters the PIN number, then the cash automatically comes out. These contracts are called as what? Tacit contracts. They are also recognized by court of law. Then comes quasi-contracts. What do you mean by quasi-contracts? Something which is not like a direct contract but is a contract. But it is still called as a contract. How can that be possible, ma'am? You're sounding funny. Now, quasi, the Latin meaning, the Latin word quasi means similar. So, what exactly is a quasi-contract or similar to contracts? Quasi-contract is something wherein, wherein it is something like a contract but not a direct contract. After filling that sentence, let me take an example. See, responsibility of finder of lost goods. Let's say Mr. A had lost some goods. Mr. A lost certain goods. So, let's say Mr. A had lost his precious diamond ring on the road. Okay. Now, B is passing by through that road. He happens to find this diamond ring. So now what is the responsibility of Mr. B? He has to find out as to who Mr. A is, or in case if he is not able to find the rightful owner, he has to deposit it in the nearby police station. Okay, there is no, actually Mr. B had not entered into any contract, Mr. A had not entered into any contract, there is no police station in question, but still all these three can be considered as quasi-contract. Like the moment Mr. B finds a ring on the road, he is considered to be in a quasi-contract with Mr. A out of good faith. Law recognizes quasi-contracts as well. Let's take an easier example. Let's say you have found a pencil in a class. Pencil would sound. Let's say we have found a wallet in a classroom. Okay, what is your responsibility? Take that wallet and keep it with you? No, that comes under stealing. You take that wallet and then you give it to, let's say, the administration of the school, or you try to ask that person. You, after reasonable checks, you try to identify that person and give it to the person who has lost it. That is called as what? Quasi-contract. Initially, we didn't have the proposer, we didn't have the acceptor, we didn't have a promise and all, but still it will come under quasi-contract. Something similar to contract. Here is not an actual contract, but it resembles a contract. And when is it created? Please underline that particular sentence. It is created by law under special circumstances, and please underline the example. The next one is e-com contracts. E-com contracts is which we are doing it in our daily life. Either simple things like paying your electricity bill, or paying salaries, or even booking movie tickets. Here you don't have any face time, that is, you don't sit opposite a person personally, discuss things, execute a contract. No, the contract is executed via email. The proposal is made via email, the acceptance is received via email. Those kind of contracts are called as e-com contracts. Then comes based on execution. Executionary contracts are those contracts which have been executed. Then plural form. They have been executed. It's executed contracts. Then comes non-executionary contracts are those contracts which are, the contract is yet to be executed, that have not been executed. Let's say these contracts can be further divided into unilateral and bilateral contracts. Please underline this unilateral contract is, please underline this line in page number 1.10 of your study material. Unilateral contract is a one-sided contract in which one party had performed his duty or obligation and the other party's obligation is still outstanding. Like, what do you mean by that? I'll explain it using an example. Mr. M had advertised stating, Mr. M had advertised stating that, say like his, let's say his precious jewelry had been lost, and in case if somebody finds it, he'll give him a reward of 50,000 rupees. So let's say Mr. N had found a jewelry. Now Mr. N, this is an executionary contract in view of unilateral agreement. That is what Mr. N had found out, that particular jewelry. N had performed his job, but Mr. M is yet to compensate. Money here only Mr. N had performed his duty. Mr. M is yet to pay him money. So because one side had already completed his performance or his part in the contract, it is called as a unilateral contract. Regarding this example, I'll explain it to you while explaining different types of offers. Please don't get confused. You can take this example, whatever I have taught you as of now, as a base. So that is unilateral contract. One person has performed his part of the contract. The other person is yet to perform his part. Then comes bilateral contracts. Bilateral means what? There are two parties. Let's say agreement of sale of house property. Mr. A had entered into an agreement with the B to sell his house property after 6 months. See, mind you, here there is an agreement. Say after 6 months for say 50 lakhs. Here there is an agreement. Mr. A and Mr. B also have agreed to it. But did they complete their part? No. Mr. A has to sell his property and Mr. B has to pay the consideration. When will that happen? That will happen only after 6 months. So bilaterally also, both the parties have not executed their contract. That is called as what? Bilateral contracts. This comes under the head non-executionary contracts, or the contracts, executionary contracts which are yet to be complied with. That is, they are yet to come into force. Executed contracts and executory contracts. In case of any doubts, please let me know. Yeah, these are the different types of contracts as per Contract Act. Now we'll talk about different kinds of offers. First, I'll explain about what are the different kinds of offers. Then we'll talk about how are they made, either express or by implied manner. Then comes different kinds of offers. So what are the different kinds of offers? See, initially we have learned what are the prerequisites of a contract. There should be an offer. So how will an offer be made? Are there any different kinds of offers? Yes, we'll be learning them right now. So what are the different kinds of offers? General offer, special offer, counter offer, cross offer, counter, or I can call it as cross offer, and then standing offer. Counter offer, cross offer, and then standing or continuing or open offer. shall explain all these offers via a small case study or an example and the meaning. Then I'll ask you to mark it in your study material. That is very important. You please directly take the gist of it from your study material. One line. But before that, please understand the meaning as to what are the different kinds of offer. First and foremost, general offer. Here also we have a case study called as Carlyle versus Carbolic Smoothball. So general offer is, the offer is available to general public at large. The acceptance can be given by anybody. Yeah, it is not just one single person. This particular offer is open to everybody. You cannot say that, best example is, you can see supermarkets advertising saying that, like, in case if you find any less quality in the products they are offering, then they are going to reimburse some money or they'll prepay the damages. What is that called? General offer. It is open to everybody purchasing goods or groceries from their supermarket. That is called as general offer. It is made to general public. Then here they have explained it via a case study called as Carlyle versus Carbolic Smoke Company. Carbolic Smoke Company is a pharmaceutical company, and they have manufactured something called as smoke balls way back in early 19th century. I mean to say early 19th century is period between mid 18th century to 19th century. Like early 19th century, they were manufacturing these ball kind of things, and they have said that anybody who uses these balls, they'll never ever suffer from influenza or flu. But there was this lady called as Mrs. Carlyle, right? Mrs. Carlyle used these smooth balls, but she still got flu. So what she did, she went and sued this company in court of law. The court held, the honorable court held, said that Mr. Carlyle is eligible for damages because this particular offer, whatever this Carbolic Smoke Company's offer is there, it is applicable to general public as well. This is called as what? General offer. Am I clear? Carlyle versus Carbolic Smoke Company. Please underline that case study. Page number 1.12. The first line, general offer, it is an offer made to public at large and hence anyone can act and do the desired act. This is as per section 8 of the act. Case study is Carlyle versus Carbolic Smoke Company. In terms of section 8 of the act, anyone performing the conditions of the offer can be considered to have accepted the offer. Please read the case study. You underline the first 2 points and read the case study over here. There's another case study called as Lalman Shukla versus Gauri Dutt. Here, this is quite an interesting case study. Offer and acceptance. There was this Mr. Lalman Shukla is the servant and Mr. Gauri Dutt. Gauri Dutt is his boss. So Gauri Dutt had sent his servant to search for his son. Mr. Gauri Dutt's son was lost. And in the meanwhile, and he sent his servant also across to search for his son. And in the meanwhile, Gauri Dutt announced a reward for anyone who would find his son. Okay. So after a few days, Mr. Lalman found his son. Okay, and gave it to Mr. Gauri Dutt. Gave the son. I mean to say, he brought his son back to Gauri Dutt. Gauri Dutt said, "I'll not give you the reward." Lalman, in the meanwhile, he got to know about the reward and he asked Mr. Gauri Dutt, "Sir, please, can you give me that reward?" And Mr. Gauri Dutt said, "No." Then they both put a case in court of law. the court had finally said that Lalman is not eligible for reward. Why, madam? Even though the offer was made in a general manner, Mr. Lalman was not aware of that offer. Mr. Lalman went in search of the sum, but definitely he was not aware of the offer. So that's why, as he is not aware of the offer, he is not entitled to reward. So this is Gauri Dutt versus Lalman case with regard to general offer. Then comes special offer. Please underline this slide. When the offer is made to a specific person, it is known as specific offer. Specific offer can be accepted only by the specified person to whom the offer has been made. So here we'll be talking about Bolton versus Jones in offer and invitation to offer. I'll be explaining about this in invitation special offer, like what are the essentials of an offer. What are the essential aspects of an offer? I'll be explaining about this case study. As of now, please remember special offer means it should be made to one particular person only. Then comes counter offer. This is a very interesting offer. Let's say Mr. A had gone to Mr. B for purchase of house property, or for sale of house property. Mr. A asked Mr. B to purchase his house property, or he gives an offer to Mr. B for his, saying that he is going to sell his house property for say 25 lakhs. Now B says, sorry sir, I'll not take it for 25 lakhs, I'll take it for 20 lakhs. Okay, you're getting me? Here, you cannot say it as conditional acceptance. You say this particular offer had been rejected and a new counter offer had been given by Mr. B. Now, Mr. B himself had given an offer to Mr. A, stating that, Mr. A, can you please sell this property for 20 lakhs. Please underline this. When the offeree offers to qualified acceptance, page number 1.3 counter offer, when the offeree offers to qualified acceptance of the offer, subject to modifications and variations in terms of original offer, he is said to have made a counter offer. Counter offer, see, please underline this, make it as important. It can come as, he can ask you as a case study also. Counter offer amounts to rejection of original offer. The original offer holds no good, and it can be called as conditional acceptance. That is called as counter offer. Then comes cross offer. What is this cross offer? Cross offer is like here both A and B are not aware, but their objective is same. What do you mean by that? A wants to sell his car for 2 lakhs to Mr. B. A is having a car. He wants to sell this car to Mr. B for 2 lakhs. Mr. B also agrees to, he with an intention of selling his car to Mr. B is about to put his offer to B. In the meanwhile, Mr. B also wants to purchase the car from Mr. A for 2 lakhs. Mind you, both have not come into being yet. So he comes with his offer saying that, Mr. A, do you know I want to purchase your car for 2 lakhs. This is called as cross offer. Both of them, both are having an offer to a contract, and it is getting, it is getting over, I can call it as, not getting the exact word, you can say it as they are crossing each other paths. So that is called as cross offer. Please underline this line. When two parties exchange identical offers in ignorance at the time of each other's offer, the offers are called as cross offers. Please underline that word. They can be asked. The next one is standing or continuing offer. Standing means, like, first I'll give you an example. Like tenders are caught. Usually tenders are caught Tenders, like let's say the government is deciding to construct a new bridge or let's say new road. So tenders will be placed by different contractors. They'll quote certain amount. Contractor A will say, I'll build that particular house for 50,000 rupees. Another contractor B will say that he'll build that particular road for 40,000 rupees. Some other contractor will come and say, I'll build that road for 45,000 rupees. Some will come and say, I'll build that road for 39,000 rupees. So the government, after looking into pros and cons of various quotations received, they'll select Mr. C. They'll give a reasonable time frame. Within that time frame, the tenders are invited. The tenders should place the quotations. Tenders means the various contractors, they have to quote a price for constructing that particular road or property or building. That is called as an tender. So offer for tenders is a standing or a continuous offer. It is available for a particular time frame. Okay, so please underline this word. An offer which is allowed to remain open for acceptance over a period of time is known as standing or continuing